Welcome to Investible Partnerships, where we talk to industry leaders about growing revenue-generating partnerships. I'm your host, Des Russell, and co-founder of Partner Elevate. And the daily battle for partner success is forcing channel leaders to rethink how to maximize their relevance and value so they can be a driver of partner impact. So let's jump in and find out how. Hey, Elliott, welcome to the Investible Partnerships podcast. It's really good to have you here and to join our conversation today as we learn more about how you are being a driver of partner impact. First, love to get to understand a little bit more about your background, your role that you're currently in, and also, really importantly, understand, what was your journey into partnerships? So over to you.
Super. Thanks, Des, and thanks for the time. And I'm really looking forward to being on the Investible Partnerships podcast. So a little bit about myself, Elliott Haralambous. I am a Director of Partners and Alliances at Backbase. Backbase is the makers of the world's leading engagement banking platform, which powers over about 150 banks globally that most people on this podcast would probably recognize. A little bit about myself. I look after currently all things to do with partnerships, alliances, and go-to-markets within the Australia-New Zealand territory. Previous to this, I looked after Backbase's global go-to-market with all kind of cloud providers and independent software vendors, globally orchestrating across all regions. And previous to that, I was looking after our consulting and strategy partnerships. So I've kind of touched all different pieces of how an independent software vendor goes to market with cloud, ISVs, and within the region. And it's great to spend some time with you today. A little bit about me. I think I'm pretty similar to a lot of people who come into the partnerships and alliances space, which is, we obviously all didn't go to university or college trying to do this type of work. We found ourselves into it. So I've had a bit of a left and right journey. I started my career as an engineer, specifically an energy engineer. Got a little bit over, let's say, being part of a larger process and tried to move into something a bit more dynamic. So I spent a bit of time as a strategy consultant and a digital consultant across Australia and broader Asia. Once I got into more mid-level management, decided that a time was for me to get overseas. So moved over from Australia over to the Netherlands and did a few more years with a global firm over there. Whilst also doing that, I was running my own startup, which you may or may not have seen on Dragon's Den a number of years back. And then towards the end of my consulting career, I decided that, it was time for me to do something a bit different. And I came across Backbase. So during that time, I've tried a little bit of scale-up, corporate, enterprise experience, and really found my feet at Backbase in a partnerships role because it was really that launching place and the intersection between tech, go-to-market, and most importantly, at the coalface of what's happening in the market. So been here for almost 5 years now and look forward to a promising future ahead. And I think that really relates also to a lot of other people I see in more senior positions within partnerships and alliances. They come from really different parts of the world, both from an experience perspective and a geographic perspective. People come up through product, people come up through, let's say, typical sales or direct sales, people come in from consulting, but a lot of people get to partnerships and alliances and stay there for a long time. And I think it's because it's a very dynamic role to have.
It's probably indicative of quite a few of the leaders that we've had on the Investible Partnerships podcast. They're picking up skills and picking up experiences from different areas of tech and different areas of non-tech. And they're kind of starting to bring this and blend this into what today is a really important role in major tech companies, whether they're public or private companies. I'm interested to just double click into your startup career because I'd love to know how you got from coffee into the next phase. So what was that all about?
Yeah, so I think this was a number of years back, and myself and a consulting colleague of mine started a company within Australia, which was fairly well known, called Pod and Parcel, and we were one of the first innovators when it came to subscription-based, biodegradable and compostable coffee sent straight to your doorstep. And we kind of took the concept of what if you had a Melbourne cafe in your own home coffee machine every day? And we partnered with probably some of the best coffee establishments in Victoria and Australia, and put them in a format which people could really, get a lot of brand alignment with and engage with a community of people who, really liked the ease of having a home coffee machine, but didn't really identify with, one of the large mega brands that you might find in a supermarket. And that was probably the first time I dipped my toes in the concept. Well, actually, partnering is a really powerful force, because although you might be providing a good or service that's quite similar to what's out there in the market,
Yeah.
if you align with the principles and the values and what consumers, customers, or the market actually wants, you can really create this 1+1=3 proposition. But I think from that perspective, it was a really great place to start. And also, I got used to doing a lot with very little. And I think if you want to be successful in the world of partnerships, you need to be really ready to kind of kickstart those partnerships with this in the smell of an oily rag, because CROs and leaders, they often won't invest till they see some kind of results.
Absolutely. We're getting the partnership leaders, which we're both part of, and this podcast is part of the Built with Partnership Leaders. They just released their Chief Partnership Officer report, and I've got a question about that a little bit later, because I'm just diving into it. It was released last week Friday, and the detail and the insights that they've got in terms of what's actually happening in this industry at an executive level, in the tech industry, at an executive level, and what's really happening around this role of partnerships as we move into operating a significant amount of the revenue, or being responsible for significant of the amount of revenue that companies are generating in this particular tech space. But your point around what you learned in your startup in partnerships, understanding really what do people want, it's really this point of relevance and value. And I think this relevance and value is something that I always talk about when we talk with our customers at Partner Elevate. And this is, how do you have this consistent relevance and value in your partnership? What do you bring into the partnership? So how do you do this at Backbase in your current role? How do you keep this relevance and this value? Because you've got different types of partnerships, right? You've got consulting services partners, you've got cloud hyperscaler partnerships. So what's going on? How do you maintain this?
Yeah, Des, that's a really good question. And I think it goes back to my previous point about people from partnerships, particularly in leadership positions, coming from different experience sets. I think a lot of people, particularly within your organization, whether it be my current organization, which is Backbase, or whomever it might be, where they think that the focus of the partnerships role is engaging with external stakeholders to build a differentiated value proposition. And that's absolutely one piece of the equation. But I think where a lot of people trip up is we really have to think about who your internal customer is as a partnerships leader, right? Are you the person who is serving your field sales team? Are you the person that's serving, the maturity of your product by making the integrations more powerful or relevant or strong? Are you assisting with taking some load off delivery and customer success? And really framing yourself in who is my internal customer actually defines how you externally engage within the market, right? And I think a lot of people in our industry perhaps have that mixed back to front. Now, you can go and forge the most important and valuable hyperscale partnership or ISV partnership or consulting services partnership. But if you haven't considered how it makes someone's day-to-day job, quicker, simpler, more relevant, more revenue, but actually introduce, challenge, risk, or effort, you're going to struggle to be successful. Yeah. So I think from my perspective is thinking about that 1+1=3 isn't just about revenue. It's about the human element, which is actually at the coalface. How are you making that delivery director, that product manager, that AE or account executive's life's easier day to day? If you start there and work backwards, I think you can make huge impact in organizations. If it's about saying, look, I want to get a marquee relationship with XYZ consulting company, I think you're going to be in for a tough trot.
Yeah. So let's go into that, because that's a great point of view. I think having an internal view, how do you make someone internally the hero of the story? You know, we do think externally, how do we make the partner or the customer the hero of the story? But internally, so let's try and pack this for our audience, and maybe you can use specific examples of how you are doing this, how you've done this in your particular role. So, yeah, where should they start when it comes to finding that alignment internally? Like, does it start at a strategy level? Does it start at a execution level? Where does it start?
So I think a really good place for all the listeners of this podcast to start is really identifying internally where friction is really felt. Now, is it friction in getting a deal from opportunity to closure? Is it friction in getting your customers live and happy? Is it friction in particularly serving different parts of the world with specific integrations, right? And from my perspective, if you start the friction can make partnerships because you can ease it and add huge value, or friction can kill your partnerships, right?
Yeah.
If you're adding to that friction set, there's a very good chance that your ability to make an impact will be diminished. If you reduce that friction set, well, then that's something completely different. I think one of the examples that I like to use is we were having within my current role or my previous role, we were having a very strategic partnership with a particular hyperscaler, right? And this partnership itself was, of course, a marquee partnership. It was something which we could tell very loudly and clearly into the market. But the real friction that we heard in the market is, from a customer perspective, what is my burning platform to move to cloud? From a Backbase perspective or an ISV perspective, what's my burning platform to partner with these huge organizations? And from those huge organization perspectives, how do I be relevant in really specific business processes? Now, you bring all these ingredients together, you suddenly create a situation where there's an incentive for a bank to go big on cloud. There's a huge opportunity for the hyperscaler to move from a horizontal to a vertical kind of capability set, because they can't be all things to all people. And then from your perspective, being the independent software vendor and bringing these together, well, there's not only commercial incentives, but there's value incentives for everyone to work on the same page. Now, that's a really clear example of where's this friction exist in these three parties? How do we make it work? If you did that equation on pure, let's say, economic value in dollars and cents, it may have not have stacked up.
Yeah.
If you looked one level beneath, what do they actually want to achieve? You can make great things happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think another thing from that perspective there is that might be your objective, but process and predictability trump style 9 out of 10 days a week. If through that process you can help all parties, whether they be your customer, your partner, or your internal customer or your internal stakeholder, knowing where they are in the process, what they can expect to get out of that process, and more importantly, give them the timelines day to day, week to week, month to month, your probability of success is really high. You come in as a hot shot and promise the world and perhaps not meet that mark. It may be challenging for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, is this a maturity, the process and the predictability? Is this a maturity of your partner program, or can you bring a level of process and predictability even when you just establishing or in those early stages of your partner program? Because I think a lot of people think that this is a maturity thing as opposed to something else. What's your point there?
Yeah, so I think something which I feel pretty near and dear to is that, whether you're in sales, product, or customer success, or whatever it is, we all follow a common way of doing business, right? Now, that may be implicit or explicit. So I think I would probably go as far to say that 9 out of 10 organizations in the market today who partner don't have a very strongly embedded partner program. Does that mean that 9 out of 10 organizations are bad at partnering? No way. It just means they haven't programized and systemized and embedded those things. So I think as long as you have those strong values and ways of working enriched within your team and within your organization, you can have that process and predictability. Now, absolutely, I recommend that you bring it into a program and execute faster and more effectively. But I think the important part here is making a discrete choice to say that the way we do things is considered, and we have a responsibility internally and externally to work in a certain way. It makes a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I can't agree. I can't agree more. And I think a lot of us are building partner programs and flying the plane. Building the plane and flying the plane at the same time. So I think
there's just on top of that too. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Situations where you have to adhere to your partner's program, right? And what happens there? If you're working with a hyperscaler, or you're working with a global consulting organization, or you're even working with one of the largest software companies in the world, often their program is the way that you work, and you don't have a lot of capacity to make an impact on that. However, the way in which you work is super important. And the absolute reality is, like sales, people like dealing with people from a partnerships perspective that brings value to their day-to-day work.
Yeah.
If you're a person that makes that day-to-day work or effort with more friction or more challenging, it's a conscious decision is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think it's this, how do I make your life easier? And I don't necessarily think we double click too much on that. And that's a challenge, or it's a problem actually, because the reality is it's the value add that we're trying to kind of work out here. Do I need you? Can you help me? And we tend to kind of more operate at the kind of, I don't know, the fictitious area of, well, we're going to partner. We've got customers. You've got customers. Naturally, we're going to find some way to work here. But it's not always the case. It's not really. You should know the value that you can add to a partner or the customer before you've even started that partner conversation, because that's your role to understand where you're going to unlock this partnership. And we don't have enough time that's spent on that particular thing. I don't know what you think, if that's something that you see as well.
I totally agree, Ryan. I think the reality is that you're never in a phone call or a video conference or a custom meeting where people says, you know what, I'm actually not that busy at the moment. People are really busy all the time, and your job, whether it be in partnerships or alliances or ecosystems or whatever your organization orientates that point to, is your job is to cut through the noise and prove that your value proposition is defensible and worthy of their time. Because every hour they spend with you could be hour they can spend selling, developing other partnerships, working on their organizations. So you really have to be 10 times more relevant, 10 times more interesting, and get to the crux of how do you actually mutually provide value. Now, I can't say how many times I've been in a phone call where, you start off, hey, we're working in this industry with these customers, and you're working with similar industry customers. I'm sure if we just spend time together, we'll make money by osmosis. Now, as much as I'd love to be in a situation where revenue could be made by osmosis, the reality is that we have to be a lot more deliberate here.
Yeah.
I think something that I really wanted to touch on there is, and the big recommendation I can give to those people, particularly in global roles, is spend as much time as you can at the coalface. So if you're headquartered in North America or the UK or Western Europe or Singapore, whatever it might be, get on a plane, get in calls, get to the coalface of your regions, because the story that's told at HQ is often very different than the story that's told day to day. And unless you can adequately provide value at that coalface, you may be in a situation where you're building all these fantastic programs and go-to-markets, but they're not getting picked up. Picked up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have that here in the APAC region, right? Because we typically this is kind of the last frontier often when it comes to growth in markets. It's kind of North America, and then we'll go Europe, and then we'll come, kind of head across to Southeast Asia or the APAC region. And there's often this playbook that's kind of inferred, which is the playbook which is going to potentially get you ahead. But the reality is that there's just no this is a hyper-local region, hyper-local business models in every single country as you go ahead. So how are you doing that? Because you're growing the region here. So what are you doing when you say get on the cold face? Are you meeting with every single partner? Are you across the marketing ops team? Are you across the sales ops team? What are you doing to kind of build that out in your role?
Yeah, I think one of the largest reflections that I have working in the region, where previously I was working in a more global role, is go-to-markets that myself I set up 12 months, 18 months, 24 months earlier, that now I was picking up and executing them in the region. I started to spot all the pieces which I may not have seen myself, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized to myself that actually, whether you're in, Colombia, Vietnam, Australia, or in everywhere in between, every region has the possibility and the benefit of being a lighthouse in a new type of partnership, in a new success case, and actually rewriting the global strategy in a positive way. Now, one of the big learnings I had in my previous roles, I tried to execute a global strategy in all regions at the same time. So when things were going well, it was thumbs up. When you start to hit rocks, you hit rocks everywhere at the same time concurrently, right? So for those in the regions, whether it's in HQ in some of the more mature territories, or whether it's in some of the more growth territories, I really recommend that there's nothing wrong with you forging a path that then can be adopted by global, because ultimately the coalface is where the revenue exists. And if you can kind of provide tangibility to that, big things can change.
So linking that strategy, even though it's a global strategy, but linking that to revenue and then having a pathway to revenue, which is really the ultimate, whether it's a partner journey that globally they're trying to bring down, but locally it might be that hyperscalers actually in this region aren't your go-to. It's actually services-based partners. So
It could be. I mean, again, I do strongly reinforce that doesn't mean that in the region go off script and do whatever you want. You still need to embody and live, the strategic intent of your organization. But proving success that makes sense in your region, I think, is a really good way to not only influence a global strategy, but to show leadership on the ground. Because all our global go-to-markets are just a collection of regional learnings, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at your role, how far do you go? How far do you go into the vision setting for partnerships versus the execution in this quarter, in this fiscal year to achieve that revenue number? Where do you put your thoughts? Where do you put your time and energy? And then how do you reconcile that, particularly when you're looking at particular go-to-markets or investments that aren't a near now thing, but are and more an intuition of where you think the market's going?
Totally. Yeah, I think this concept of a two-speed operating model is super important, right? So if we in the partnerships and alliances discipline are only looking to the next quarter, that's how we end up with years and years of tactical partnerships that bring you revenue once and twice and never again, right? And there's big pitfalls there. I mean, it may make your line management happy because you reach your quarterly goal, but you'll still be chasing that quarterly goal in 3, 6, 9 quarters. I think my biggest recommendation is that you have a responsibility to serve the people that you serve in the field, frontline sellers, customer success, whomever it may be. But you also have a leadership component in your role to spot what might be happening 12 or 18 months from now. And if you don't invest in both elements of the pie, you're either going to have a very happy, let's say, management team and a perhaps unhappy field team, or vice versa. So it's your responsibility to balance these two needs. And I think that comes back to really about something that I'm super passionate about, which is, one of the biggest challenges that faces people within partnerships and alliances today isn't so much about an investment issue. I think a lot of people are talking today about, well, my team is getting less investment, less focus, less time. I'm not allowed to do the things that I want to do. I think we have a bigger issue in our kind of industry of a traceability issue, right? How do we make sure that our leadership and our kind of regional teams understand what actually moves the dial? And that's something which I'm really passionate about, right? So think of yourself in your revenue leadership. They want to know 4 simple things, right? What is the maturity of my partners? Where do they sit in the curve? If I manage 20 partners, which are level 10, which are level 1? Knowing that is super important. What's the status of my partnership, right? So how often did my partners actually in the revenue that they touched truly move the dial? And how much was that an exercise of them just being in the room? Really understanding what my organization wants to achieve with partners. How does my plan impact the organization's own goals?
Yeah.
And, we do have to have a hard think about what the ROI of the partnerships teams are. Are we making the right bets in the right places? So I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that for all those people out there who may have concerns about, let's say, the level of investment and the seat at the table, I think changing the narrative by saying, does my organization know what I do and how that moves the dial? And if it doesn't, how do I make it more predictable and process-based so they can?
Yeah.
Because
100% agree. It's what is your story as a partnership leader that you are telling consistently over and over again, whether you're talking to your RevOps, or you're talking to your sales teams, or you're talking to your marketing operations team or your customer success team. What is the story that you tell that is not about what partners are actually doing, but the impact that they are having on the business to all of those levers that you are strategically trying to drive. And it's absolutely something I'm quite passionate about. It's something that I actually learned when I spent 7 years at Microsoft, and I had this great leader that was my manager, and we used to go into the QBRs because everyone loves a QBR, and I think the first session, the first time he took over and he ran a QBR, he absolutely annihilated everyone in terms of how they were presenting the QBR because there was no story to it. It was like I could read that. I know the data because there's dashboards. We all got dashboards. I've seen the numbers, but tell me the story behind the numbers that I need to be aware of that you want to make investments in to move us from here to here. Totally. So yeah, I love that. I love that. How do you tell that story? Do you have a bit of a model that you use to tell the story?
I do have a model, and I think I do have a system and process which I adopt in my day-to-day work, and hopefully I try and get others to adopt it too. But it comes down to a really, really simple principle, right? If at the end of a partnership process or a sales cycle or whatever it might be, if you have people questioning if it was or if it was not touched or influenced or impacted or invested with that partner, you have told the story far too late. You need to be that person's champion through that 6, 8, 9, 12, 18-month process where by the time you're actually asking something from your organization or kind of giving it the tick box that they've been impacting, people are nodding as opposed to asking questions. Yeah. So back to that point, which is what can you do? What are the series of steps, processes, and day-to-day actions that you can then demonstrate to your organization that you're moving in the right direction? Because guess what? In the world of enterprise sales, a deal can take more than a year. So when you're having your first QBR, right? Yeah. You're going to have 4 QBRs with 2 executives or 3 executives where there's no revenue on the table. Without a story there, it's going to be challenging, right? So you need to...
It's going to be a tough conversation, man.
Correct, because we don't live... We might assess ourselves in the quarterly world, but some worlds you make revenue yearly, right? So you just need to make sure that you can...
I think it's that investment curve, which is the reality is that if you look at, I think the point you made earlier, when you look at, when you assess the partners and you go, well, I need to know for my executive team, who are my ones and who are my tens. I'm assuming your ones are your non-producing partners that aren't moving, and your tens are the ones that are generating the revenue from you. So if you put that in a bell curve, everyone knows a bell curve, 10 over here, 1 over here, that probably represents your revenue.
Yep.
That probably represents the impact that people are making. And often I think we're kind of so focused on getting more from who's producing,
Correct,
that we actually lose the ability to go, well, what do the 80% that aren't producing, what do they need to just move that dial slowly but surely over? And I think that there's probably a myth here that their journey from 1 to 10 is going to be linear. They're going to go bang, 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 bang across, and it's more cyclical like that. So how do you reconcile that today? Is that a similar model that you have in terms of where your revenue sits? And then what are you doing to pay attention? Like, are you really leaving it in the partner's hands to kind of go, look, you're a 1 or you're a 2, you really need to be bringing something to me? Or is there something in how you executing your partner strategy where you are kind of going, look, I know ones, they're not going to get to $1 million revenue right now, but what they need to know is they need to know better. They need to understand more about our go-to-market. They need to understand more about our value proposition. So are you tactically doing something with them, or what are you guys doing?
So I think it's really important to note that there's a fallacy out there in the market today that you need all your partners to be tens. And it's just not true, right? If you work in 45, 50 plus countries in the world, there's some territories where you might do a deal once every 4 years. And the ones, and I use one in term, a transactional partner is a great partner in a limited time capacity where you work together for a deal and you move on. Nurture them for what they want. You have other partners who want to bring you consistent, ongoing delivery, revenue, joint marketing, the whole lot. Make them successful what they want to do, but don't try and treat a 10 maturity like a 1 and vice versa, right? I think this one speed operating model is what really hurts us. Some people don't want to deliver your software. Some people don't want to sell with you. Some people don't want to integrate with your products. Some people have a very different kind of objective that they want to achieve. And that goes back to my last point, which is understand where everyone's friction is, understand how you ease your friction, and design your program, your systems and your processes to really address that. And I think that's
It's a really good framework. I love that. Really, really good framework. So when you look at what you're doing today, you've got a bit of experience, right? So you kind of, I suppose you've got an awareness. You've got an awareness of what are the attributes that you look for when you establish in a partnership, the attributes of a good partnership. So what have you learned through your experience? Or maybe do you have a process for, and we call these investable partnerships. Are these partnerships worth investing in? Is there going to be we're not going to treat this as a transactional partnership, but a purely mutual beneficial partnership? Do you have a model or a framework that you use other than what you've explained before?
Yeah, so Des, I actually do, but considering our time and how detailed we are, perhaps it's the topic of a longer conversation. And
cool.
I do open anyone to reach out to me to have a discussion through LinkedIn or whatever if you want a more detailed perspective on this. But I think the most simple way to think about this is you need to hear the voice of your partners and your organization. You need to have a few different models of operation, and then you need to design your models of operation about what the internal customer and the partner actually wants. So if you've got one method of operation that's come be a delivery partner at XYZ company, and you have heaps of partners out there who just want to be referral partners, you're not going to be successful because you've designed your program around what you want rather than what they want. Simply put. Now, all the systems and processes and science behind it if you can't understand that foundational point, that design something that they want to work with, you're going to be stuck in a kind of a feedback cycle that's not going to be beneficial. But really passionate about this and super happy to kind of expand on this in another forum.
Okay, well, we'll definitely give everyone's your details so people can connect with you after this as well, and maybe we can do a follow up session on that, because I've definitely got a point of view that I'd love to talk more deeply about there. Maybe we'll get a couple of other leaders that have been on the podcast as well. There's one thing I wanted to kind of touch on, which is the Partnership Leaders report, which they've just released on Friday. It's a report that I think they got 200 odd chief partnership officers or leaders in partnerships in organizations, both tech and public, come through and do a survey. I mean, I think this is one of the benefits of a community like Partnership Leaders, to bring this rich data so we can understand a little bit more about what's actually going on in partnerships. And I love the fact that they honed in on the role of the chief partnership officer, and they make 3 key predictions. They actually say that in 2024, calendar year 2024, they forecast more chief partner officer roles in 2024 for 3 key things. The first thing is they talk about partnerships teams are taking more and more of the direct or more and more responsibility of the revenue. They're producing more revenue for the overall business. So there's a need for a focus. The second thing is they talk about the C-suite looking to support partnership priorities in 2024 to help achieve that, probably aligned to when you talk about the revenue number and how we're moving towards that. And the third thing is they talk about the role of the C-suite in growing technology ecosystems, which is becoming less and less only about a direct motion and a partner motion. And there's marketplace motions. There's all these other types of motions there. You haven't probably seen the report just yet, and I'll put it in the show notes. But do you have a point of view of your particular role, and you look at what you're doing in this particular region? Those 3 predictions, do you think that would you align with those 3 predictions, or do you have a point of view on really why there might be a more focus on the C-suite around investing and supporting the chief partner officer role?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with those recommendations. And I think ultimately it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which is those organizations who take partnerships seriously and give the person or persons who are responsible for the global go-to-market or the organization's go-to-market a seat at the table, usually are the ones that reap the most benefits, right? Those that view it as a side responsibility or a stepchild to sales. I mean, again, it's horses for courses for your organization, but we can't expect one and kind of invest in the other. So from my perspective, if we see the disaggregate, the more and more software companies out there, in simple terms, are more reliant on each other. The biggest organizations in the world, you name it, whether it be Salesforce, Adobe, Microsoft, Google, AWS, whomever it is, they, by definition, to serve more industries, need to become more horizontal.
Yeah.
Independent software vendors need to become more niche because, let's say, big tech is commoditizing, right? So what that means is just by those 2 market forces, you're going to see a hell of a lot more software vendors being super focused on the business problems they solve, and a lot more of the big players becoming more and more mature about what they do when it comes to, let's say, big tech. An example that we all can, it's very topical, is OpenAI, ChatGPT, right? Everyone talks about it, but there was a recent developer day where they basically said, these are all the things that you can do on our platform. All those startups that work in the AI space need to make a big decision. Do we reuse their tech and make it super focused towards a business problem? Or are we in the business of infrastructure and building the tech itself? The same thing happens in partnerships world. At the end of the day, small, more nimble software companies are going to focus on solving business problems.
Yeah.
Just because your platform is an iPaaS or a platform or an integration service, guess what? The big techs come and they have a great product and it's usually cheaper than what you can build it for. So
Yeah.
are you going to reuse and execute, or are you going to try and rebuild it from the ground up? And I feel very passionate about that.
Yeah, I think it's a point that you mentioned earlier, the intuition. What are you looking for? Are you looking forward enough to understand what is going on in your industry, in the market? And then what intuition do you bring into your partnership role in terms of the problems that you need to solve? Maybe not now only on revenue, but in long term, because that's critical thinker when you kind of think about someone who's building a revenue strategy, which is the old the Wayne Gretzky, where the puck's going, skate to where the puck's going, not to where the puck is right now.
And if, in my opinion, right, if any organization is being truly focused on delivering on a platform vision, right, and we are a platform company. If you are a platform company, partners have to be front and center. If your partners are not front and center, I would argue perhaps you're not a platform company.
You're not that. Yeah. You're not that. Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Look, man, it's been a great conversation. I would like to finish off with our Partnerships Fast 5. So Partnerships Fast 5, really, really simple. I'm going to give you a couple of sentences and I want you to just, whatever comes to your head. No prep work required and no wrong answer. 1 or 2 words to finish it off. Let's go. Everyone passes this part of the test. Okay, cool. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, first one. Partnerships thrive on?
Having a good time.
Partnerships embody?
Trust and preparation.
Through partnerships, you can?
Get grey hair.
Or lose your hair. Partnerships spark?
When you think outside the box.
And lastly, partnerships succeed through?
Internal commitment, executed externally. It's a bit verbose, but I think it's true, right?
Okay, cool. Love it. Awesome. Partnerships Fast 5 passed with flying colors. Love the there's always, whenever there's a hair color or hairstyle joke, I've got to jump in them anyway. It's been so good to have you on the Investible Partnerships podcast. There's so much to learn from your experience. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love what you've shared. There's certainly a bunch of threads there that I think our community can pick up on. And if they want to get a hold of you and interact with you or talk to you about anything, how best can they do that?
So Des, anyone for the listeners today, feel free to reach out to me either through professional channels in my current capacity or just Elliott Haralambous on LinkedIn, right? I'm more than happy to discuss the world of partnerships itself or perhaps even it relates to my role today. But I think something we should all take forth from this is that we can learn a lot from our own community and we can set our own rules. And the more we start talking the same language, the quicker this entire flywheel will kind of drive through our industry. So, Des, appreciate the time and having you on the podcast today. And I'm sure it won't be the last.
Awesome. Thanks very much, man. Catch ya. Bye. Thank you for listening to Investible Partnerships. Subscribe wherever you listen and visit investablepartnerships.com for the transcripts of today's show.